Hey guys, I'm trying a new thing where I'm gonna write with my graphics pen at the same time while talking, so just bear with me. We're gonna do some of the basics for type, and we're gonna look at introverted intuitives. So I'm gonna say this up here. I'm just gonna say the NI DOMs for short. We'll call them NI DOMs. Okay, and there's two of them we're gonna look at, and the first one would be INTJ. Okay. That we're looking at. Okay, so INTJ, and we have a dominant function, which would be introverted intuition. Dominant function, and this is like what people spend most of their time doing, or not most of their time doing, but what they're most confident in, and what'll be most apparent when when you meet somebody. It's like something that'll stick out the most is their dominant function. And we also have an auxiliary function, or I don't know. It's called a creative function in socionics, but it's just like a secondary function. Okay, so you could say like a primary and a secondary. So the auxiliary is like secondary. Zil. I believe there's two L's. I may have spelled that wrong, and I'll have to like restart the video. Whatever. So we can say for INTJ, it's NI. Okay, and for the dominant, for the auxiliary, or whatever the second one is, whatever you want to call it, because there's so many different like personality type. There's so many different like ways that this has been. I don't know if they've been patented, but there's so many different ways that people like to look at this stuff. But it's the same in all of them. If any of them are real, in all of them they're the same. So the INTJ type has dominant introverted intuition and auxiliary extroverted thinking. And if you want to look at the other type that is also introverted intuition, dominant, you can say we have INFJ. Okay? So they're dominant. Dominant NI. Yep. And their auxiliary. Auxiliary is FE. So we say we have functions. We have 8 functions, and they're kind of like attitudes. You have an introverted attitude and you have an extroverted attitude for each one, and you have like 4 different kinds. So you have thinking, intuition, sensing, and feeling. So the top 2 for the NI DOMs are an introverted intuition function for the dominant, and then their auxiliary is an extroverted function. Okay, so their secondary function is extroverted, while their dominant is introverted, and their dominant function is a perceiving function, and their auxiliary is a judging function for both. Okay, so they're both actually lead perceivers, even though in the Myers-Briggs they're called judgers, but you'll see like in socionics they're referred to as perceivers. But it doesn't really matter what you call them. It just matters how you understand the material. So if you have introverted intuitive in your dominant function, then we can look at a shorthand notation from a book that's written by a psychotherapist. And if you're familiar with my channel, then you've seen this guy over and over. So the introduction is kind of unnecessary, but it is a basics video. So for people that are kind of new, maybe you haven't seen this before. So if you're new, we can say you can follow NI here, like in this chart. You can follow it from like kind of like a stereotypical or like a first glance kind of thing, which would be like that this person is spending a lot of time imagining. And then once you get to understand it better, you'll see that this person is this process looks like the person is seeking to know, or is knowing. And then at the core, introverted intuition is about divining. Wow, that was hard to say. I don't know why. But yeah, it's about divining. Okay, I don't know why I was thinking defining, but divining. So that's the same for both of these people, right? So for the INTJ and INFJ types, you'll see somebody who's it makes somebody who's withdrawn if you have an introverted function in your dominant function, but it's particularly somebody who is withdrawn, and it may look like it's somebody that spends a lot of time in their heads imagining stuff, very withdrawn and in their own little world, coming up with new possibilities. And that's how you might spot somebody, like, or if you meet somebody like for the first time. It looks like they're a person who likes to withdraw into their own little world and spend a lot of time imagining. So that's the same for both of them. But if you look at the judging functions, because remember, if I go back to the notes, we said one has an extroverted thinking auxiliary function, and one has an extroverted feeling auxiliary function. So if we look over here, then we just see, okay, well, if you are looking at somebody who's an introverted intuitive, you're looking at somebody who is very withdrawn, right? And they're imagining stuff. But you have the two different types. So one, on the other hand, when they the way they're going to stand out when they interact with their external world through an extroverted function, it's going to look like they're a person who's very like pedantic and spends a lot of time regulating stuff. So that's like what it looks like, and I'll highlight it. It's not hard to find, but the graphics pen it is. Man, that's a pain in the ass. Okay, for some reason I can't highlight correctly, but yeah, it's right here, regulating. So it's someone who is very withdrawn and is in their head imagining new ideas and new possibilities, but they also have this streak of being kind of pedantic and regulating their environment, or at least that's kind of what it looks like stereotypically, or like at a first glance. And then if you get to know them a little bit better, it's like what's really going on is somebody who spends a lot of time planning, and at the core of what they're doing, like these two, you might say like, okay, this is what it looks like they're doing, but at the core, it's like they're enforcing some sort of logic in their external world. For somebody that is an extroverted feeler, so for the INFJ type, there's the auxiliary is extroverted feeling. So at a stereotypical level, it looks like, okay, well, you have this very withdrawn, imaginative person who is not really concerned with the external sensory world. That's something that's going to stand out to you. But also, what's going to stand out to you is they like to validate other people's emotions. So it's like they're spending a lot of time. They're spending a lot of time when they're not withdrawn, validating people, and that's what it looks like stereotypically or at a first glance. Okay, so you're catching the pattern. If you move up to, if you spend more time around them, you kind of see that this person is spending time affirming people as well. They're not just validating people, they're affirming people. That's what it looks like at a closer level. If you put the person under the microscope, however, and you look at the core of extroverted feeling separated from the other functions, then you'll realize that it refers to relating to other people's emotions in a strong way. So you have two different types where you can say, okay, they're both people that like to imagine. They spend their time imagining, and divining is like a consequence. It's like the end result, at the core. But the difference is that the thinking type person will look like they're like pedantic and regulating, and the feeling type introverted intuitive will look like they are validating people. And they're genuinely going to be like, if you look at the second column here, like the extroverted thinker will genuinely be spending more time planning, or that'll be more of a strength than the feeling type introverted intuitive. And vice versa with the feeling type one, where affirming people is going to be a strength for them, where it's not so much an emphasized strength for the thinking type person, but they're both very imaginative. And then at the core, the one, like the similarity we have is divining, but at the core, the thinking type is very interested in enforcing their logic on the external world, whereas the other person really likes to relate to people. So, they're, for the most part, they're withdrawn, though. So it's like if you have somebody who's INFJ, it's like they like to withdraw and then think up new possibilities, but then when they reach out to people, they do it through extroverted feelings. So this could be like, trying to relate to people through, spending a lot of time imagining um, imagining different scenarios, or not even different scenarios per se, because that could be, you could say, all right, well, that's just an intuition thing. What makes it introverted intuition is they're basically like relying on hunches and contemplating things and spending time alone relying on hunches and contemplating things. So it could be like, you might know an INFJ person that's like, oh, I spend a lot of time thinking about symbolism from like a religion that they don't even subscribe to, and then try to understand universals about that and then relate to people better. That's just, I mean, that's one example. There's millions of people, but it's like a possibility. Whereas in the specific is that that would be a strength for them, and that's how you could tell if that's the kind of person that you're looking at. But if you could say, all right, well, I know a person who's the thinking type, introverted, intuitive, dominant, and they also do something similar. Like they also really like to look at, they look at like mysticism and stuff, and then they try to actually come away with something that's intrinsic to them. Like they're not just reading about mysticism; they're actually trying to get something from it that's personal. Well, the thinking type person is going to want to systematize, and the feeling type person is not. That's not going to be their strength. So, yeah, it's very cut and dry. It's not like it's not like it's very complicated. Like they could be doing similar things, but these things are the sticking points. And there's other functions too. Like there's 8 functions, but these are the top 2 that should stick out. Whereas it'll be very clear, this person maybe, at first meeting them, you're like, okay, this guy's kind of, he's kind of nitpicky, and he's real stickler for the rules, and he's always regulating things. But it's really just because the person is trying to enforce rationality. Whereas the feeling type, at the end of the day, if you look at what they're at the core of what they are very good at, it's relating to people. So it may look like they're just being, they're just they're validating people at the surface level, and maybe to you, maybe you're not a feeling type, so you don't even understand what they're doing, and you think it's like superficial. I don't know, maybe because I know why you would, but it's an extroverted function, so that's kind of how sometimes people will feel about it, and they'll be like, oh, extroverted feelings very, it doesn't, it's just it doesn't go anywhere below the surface. It's very superficial, but at the end of the day, it's about relating to other people. So validating might be what it seems like, but that's not really the core. So, okay, this was a long video. Damn, it's 14 minutes, but. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how this goes over. These are the basics. It's the basics for those 2 types.